Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Collision Live. It's me, your host, Daniel, and joined at the desk, as I always am, by the 12 plagues to my Egypt, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Hey, I noticed just as we went live here that we're kind of bringing in the fall vibes here. You're in orange, I'm in red. You know,
Hey, we're bright, we're cheerful. It's the miserable Georgia summer is slowly inching towards its end, and there's a lot of stuff going on. We're excited, a lot of stuff to talk about. Kind of later, we're going to get into kind of movie ratings and this, I think, an interesting discussion. But before we get into that, anything going on this week? Anything crazy?
Well, I'm, let's see. No, nothing too crazy.
Keeping things chill. I will share, if you guys know me, if you guys have heard anything that we've talked about on this show for the last year, I'm excited for the Rings of Power show. Well, I was able to work my magic, my quick trigger finger yesterday when this sort of live fan early screening came out, which is showing the first 2 episodes in a theater. I was one of the few that was able to get in there and get tickets. So I will be seeing this before Sam, before our crew, before most of you guys on next Wednesday in the theater with my wife.
Well, so, I appreciate you letting me know after the fact that this was a possibility that one could get an early screening. It's like, oh, hey, by the way, we got tickets to this thing. It's like, oh,
hey,
a little heads up would have been nice.
As a good co-host, I sent you the link after it was already sold out. Say, hey,
appreciate
you
that.
snooze, you lose. Monty says 12 plagues. What are the extra 2? Hey, I got a little carried away with how plaguey you were, and I'm some extra biblical content, so don't hold me to that standard. Hey, there is a lot of stuff going on this week. Before we get into our conversations, how is our crew doing? We got Joni, we got Steven back there working the magic. How are you guys doing? Well, apparently we don't have the crew. Maybe we'll work that out. We'll pull them in later. But hey, if you are watching us live, glad to have you join us. Why don't we jump into the first segment of our show? We got Cultural Conversations. So several interesting things going on this week. Not necessarily anything like super controversial that we got to dive into, but I do think there's sort of several things going on in culture that kind of as Christians we can engage with and kind of see, hey, does this matter? Is there meaning to this? Can we learn from it? Can we engage with it? So why don't we kind of dive right into to some of these? The first one, which again is from my deep sorrow that I have to report that this is happening, but so it was just announced on social media a couple days ago that they are remaking the beloved classic film, The Wizard of Oz. That this thing was just announced. And again, I'm not familiar. Kenya Barris is sort of the one overseeing this. I think he's like the creator of Blackish, which I don't know if you've ever seen. I think my wife has watched it because, again, like I've said before, my wife watches everything. So I don't know anything about him or his capabilities or even his style or tone or what he's going to bring to it. But I just know that I love the original Wizard of Oz. So what do you think of it? Are you excited for to revisit the Wizard of Oz, but a kind of modern reimagining, as they're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably gonna don my grumpy old man hat for a lot of these segments today. But
do you ever take that off?
No, that's true. No, I typically am not a fan of when they remake classic movies, especially movies that are good already. And so when they remake good films that are just old, I don't know, I just think it's kind of dumb, especially it always seems like the remake is never as good as the original. Although I know that some of the beloved movies today are actual remakes of, back in the 30s or whatever.
Which is always the funny kind of the funny thing where it's the people that are so anti-remake, kind of reimagining that a lot of the great films that we enjoy, we don't realize that they're actually remakes of really old films.
Yeah,
just because they're sort of before our time. Again, if you guys are watching us live, we'd love to hear just some thoughts, some of your comments, because this is one that I'm kind of half grumpy, half of me is hey, it's different times and
I think I'll always be in favor of movie adaptations of books or comic books or magazines or whatever. But I think remaking the remake or retelling the existing story kind of just seems I don't know. It seems sort of like a waste, and it's typically not going to be as good as like that first version of like a film adaptation.
Yeah, and one of the things, because this is even like a discussion somewhat with like the Rings of Power show, is like that's something I think we forget. People like me that get grumpy is like, like they remade like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but like the original like didn't go anywhere. It's not like it like replaced and like they changed on the shelves. Like
Yeah,
like we'll always have we'll always have the originals, and like
That's-
hey,
yeah.
in some ways they're harmless, but I don't know. But something that is definitely not ambiguous
not
and
harmless.
100% harmless unless you are an absolute monster. So this is the lightest hitting of our stories, but I wasn't gonna let this pass. Papa John's is trying to make pizza popular again by offering people pizzaless pizza. So this came out, and I'm still processing like the deeper meanings of this. But they just announced they will be releasing what they call Poppables, which is basically a bowl of pizza toppings without the crust. So I want to throw it over to you, Sam. Are you like a sane person, or are you a total monster that's going to order a Poppable?
Yeah, that just seems like such a horrible mistake if you were to eat one of those. Like, I don't know, like that. I saw one tweet about this. It was basically like, oh, now they're serving us troughs. Just like a trough of toppings. It's just like, here you go. Like, no carbs in that. Just all the toppings in a bowl. Like, I don't know. I think even like because like acai bowls or whatever are all the rage, it seems. And, like just bowls of like rice and all the toppings and everything. But it's like, there's still like rice in there. And like, there's still like you need to have a platform on which to put your toppings. Otherwise,
I just don't get this. Like who goes to a pizza? Like, he's like, hey, I really don't.
I'm
feel
in the
like,
mood for
I don't
pizza,
feel like pizza.
but darn
hey,
that
let's go
bread.
to Papa John's. Like, just go get something else. Like, I don't know. Like, it just seems like, hey, not all ideas are good ideas.
No, but I think like also this idea that that pizza, like, I don't know what metrics they're using to say that like pizza's like fallen out of fashion. It's like pizza's, I don't know, like it's still very much the core of every probably American diet. It's like who's like just tired of pizza? I don't know. Like I think one of the marketing people for Papa John's was like, we're just trying to resuscitate pizza in the American conscious. It's like, I don't think it went anywhere. I don't think anybody was sitting around going, man, it's been ages since I've had pizza. I don't know. It just kind of seems weird to me. But
let's see. I don't know if we got this worked out. Do we have our crew camera working? Let's see if this works. No, we don't have them. They don't want to weigh in on the strategic.
yeah, you can still talk if you had a.
So you guys can just assume that they are both poppable, loving people. But hey, again, that's not obviously.
It sounds like you're saying poppable, like wasn't that like a? Yeah, I don't know what.
It just reminds me of the Starbucks for puppies.
Oh, okay. A pop. Yeah, I don't know. I was just like poppables. Wasn't that like a snack, like poppable, like PAPPABLE, I guess, or POPPABLE, poppable? I don't know.
I don't know. I just know that I will.
I think we've exhausted
we
the length of this rabbit trail.
I just know that hey, when I go to Papa John's, I'll be ordering pizza. Before we move to our next subject, Stephen Howard in the chat says remakes have been largely pretty bad. What remakes have actually been better than the original? I know there are some, but few and far between. I can't think of any that are better. Again, I don't know if they necessarily have to be better. I think just maybe different.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would like the only one that comes to mind, and I have done all of zero research, but like Dune, like Denis Villeneuve's Dune, I think is better than the original Dune.
Yeah, there's a low bar to cross.
Sure, so I like that's probably a bad example, but I feel like there are, or maybe like Ocean's. You could say I think Ocean's 11 was a remake, and I don't know that I ever saw the original, and I didn't know it was a remake. Like when they made Ocean's 11 with like Brad Pitt and George Clooney and all them. But I think there was one like made in the.
Because I think even just like technology, especially like the sci things like Dune. I think they're almost ripe for a remake just because we can do more. Like some of the dramas and stuff. I don't know if you necessarily can. Stephen says that he agrees about Dune. Kind of our next conversation again, not quite as fluffy, if you will, as Pizzaless Pizza. But this is the Ezra Miller saga. So this story has kind of been going on for a while, and we've had other stories and things to get to, and we haven't kind of discussed this. But Ezra Miller, again, he's been in several kind of bigger movies, and he's in the more like the Fantastic Beasts movies, and he's the Flash, and like in the Justice League and the DC universe. And his movie, The Flash, has been like in production and supposed to come out for like years. Like this thing is taking forever, delayed, and now people are questioning whether this thing will be released at all. So we don't need to necessarily go all into like the sort of his spiral, but definitely this guy has some demons he's working through, some kind of mental health stuff that he's I think thankfully getting help for right now. But just some of the reports and things, and the abuse, and just some of the stuff. It's a crazy story. If you want to kind of go down that rabbit hole, you can Google it. There's been several articles that kind of lay it out. But I think for our purposes, I guess maybe the question that I've been thinking with this is, there's been a lot of debate for like this Flash movie. Like, do they, they've been working on this thing forever. They spent tons of money on it. It's tested well with audiences. Like now they have this sort of big PR like publicity nightmare on their hand. Like a lot of people are calling them just to like cancel it. Hey, we shouldn't let guys that are have sort of this abuse and scandals, like we shouldn't support them or let them have these opportunities. And kind of Warner Brothers have been dragging their feet and not announcing whether they will. And I think trying to like see if they can kind of put the controversy down. And even like the article, there's an article on the Telegraph that says the Ezra Miller crisis has Hollywood on the rack, morals or money, and kind of pitting it as this like very moral issue. Like, if you release this movie, then like it's almost like a rubber stamp for like you support all the stuff that he did. And so, I don't know. I think it is a kind of this like artist art separation or lack of separation. Like, so what do you think of this?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, I think we've talked about sort of separating the artist from the art before, and I think this is probably another one of those cases where one probably should. And I think in his particular case, a movie like The Flash, it granted, like if he's the star of it, like that's one thing, and obviously he is because he's The Flash, but he's one like data point, if you will, one person involved in this entire movie. And so I think to be like, don't release the movie because it's immoral because your leading actor has problems, like does that negate all of the other people who have worked on this film for months and years?
And I forget what one of the articles I did recently, I was doing some research. I forget why this came up, but I think like the average like blockbuster, like a Marvel movie, obviously this isn't Marvel, but similar is like over 400 people involved in like some capacity with like, if you've ever like for a Marvel, when they force you to sit through the credits, like tons of people that are investing in this. And like, so I do think like, should they all, have their kind of project scrapped and stuff because one of them is has done regrettable things, and you don't want to support him.
And I guess I think the thing too is just sort of like, so where do you draw that line? Like, okay, we have a couple of gaffers who got busted with a DUI. Do we scrap the movie because like the gaffers have a moral failing? Like, well, probably not. But it's like, just because this person is sort of the face of it, there's somehow more. There's more weight to sort of their personal life, affecting, the movie rather than like, other people on set. And so there's clearly a hierarchy, I think, in movie making, but it's like, so where do you want to, like, at what point do we want to draw that line? And I think that's the fuzzy thing, is like a lot of people are like, oh, well, you need to scrap this, but it's like, okay, so at what point are you okay with having someone, and with what code of moralities are we going to go with when it comes to, to show or not show a particular movie?
Yeah, and it is, I think, near impossible to be fully consistent. Like, and I think most people, it becomes very reactionary of like, well, right now, Ezra Miller is like trending every day, and there's stories, and like, so he has obviously done some terrible stuff, and we don't support that, but there's a ton of jerky people in Hollywood. There's a ton of jerky people making music. Like, like I'm a classic literature kind of nerd, and like tons of them. Most of those authors were terrible people that,
Yeah.
like Hemingway and even Dickens to a degree, and like all these people like that did things and were terrible to their wife or just unbelievers, or some of them like were racist and like some of those things. And it's like, I don't know. As Christians, I think it's not like compromising to be like, hey, this is wrong, and like there should be consequences, and like we hold them accountable, but like we can also approach like this novel that they wrote on its own terms without like, and I get like some of the like, well, we're supporting these people. And again, it is a kind of a messy discussion, but I do think that you almost have to separate the art from the artist. Monty says that the new Avatar trailer just dropped. Maybe you should react live. I don't know if we're set up in here to react live. Hey, thanks a lot, James Cameron, for not dropping that trailer about an hour earlier. But hey, there was a trailer for the Rings of Power that dropped earlier, so I was excited for that. But hey, we'll probably touch on the Avatar next week. I'm excited for the movie. Steven says it's expensive to reshoot a film, but equally expensive to scrap a film. Back to the Future had to rework a lot on a tight schedule. This because the lead actor wasn't working, and it was worth it. And it is. It's a nightmare logistically, and like even just for schedules, and like I think from the armchair kind of quarterback, and it's like, oh, just get rid of it. Like, there's so much involved with that, and with the movies. It's not an easy decision. But I do think as Christians, we need to, if we're going to engage with like the arts at all, we need to learn how to like separate the artist from the art and like kind of engage with both, or else we just sort of essentially just need to step away entirely. One more kind of, and we don't need to go too deep into this, because I do want us to have time to get to our main conversation, and this is Sam's week for Host Corner, so I don't want to shortchange any of us hearing what he has to say.
You need that full minute.
Oh yeah, to digest all he has. But there was almost kind of related to Ezra Miller, but I think maybe from a bit of a different perspective. There was a viral kind of list going around on social media, kind of on Twitter and Reddit, and kind of got passed around everywhere, which has been called like the problematic authors list. If you're watching our video version, you can see on the screen like one page. There's like 7 or 8 pages thing. This, pretty much every author you've heard of, alive or dead, makes a cameo on this, and then there's the reason for it. And again, I don't want us to get like too deep in, and we don't need to go through all these authors and stuff. But like, at least to me, like, to this credit of our society, like, it seems like most people realize like this is not the way to go about things. And I think the article was eventually pulled down and stuff. But just sort of like, at least what came out to me is like a lot of the things that like are listed for why this author is problematic and needs to be like canceled and rejected is like for things that their fictional characters like did. And I don't know. I think
if you wrote a character that was a bad person, that means you must also be a bad person. Did you not realize that? Yeah,
I got through 4 years of English degree in college and somehow missed that. But that is such a, because I've seen that. Part of the reason we pulled this story is like I've seen this so much lately of like, and it applies to like film and stuff too. But just the idea that like, and I think Christians are the worst at this. And I think because we tend to approach films more like with like a message, or we talk about like agendas or some of that kind of intellectualized movies and stories more. I think we're like more the temptation to fall into this a bit more. But just the idea that like anything that happens in a story is like a direct extension of the worldview and beliefs of the author. Yeah. As opposed to just like this disconnect that, hey, these are fictional characters. This character is going to be, there's lots of characters in the story. Not all of them reflect on the author. But what do you think? Is it like, are we doomed as a society? Like this sort of problematic, like it's gonna be a long list if we keep kind of that standard.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just a ridiculous thing. I think I'll just don my grumpy old man's hat again, or keep it on and say that I don't know. I just think it's it's easier to criticize than it is to create. As I forget who said that, but just this idea that like you have to have this moral. This rigid moral structure, otherwise, you're not allowed to be, to produce anything noteworthy. It's like the list of people who aren't morally upstanding citizens that have created great art is probably as long as the list of great art almost.
And even like the flip of that too, of like upstanding moral creators that created characters that were like heinous and
Yeah.
despicable and like
Well, it's almost as if like we're not allowed to have an imagination anymore. In some cases, it's like, well, like only only a trans person can act as a trans person in this movie. Like only you must be a villain if you have a villain in like your like script or in your novel or whatever. It's like, are people incapable of like imagination now? Like that you can imagine like what a horrible person might do in this situation, or like you want to create these interesting worlds where there's just people of all kinds. It's like, well, what are we not allowed to like?
Well, and that's some of
create
the
those,
like I feel like that's some of the value of storytelling. Is like
Yeah.
you can explore things that aren't, and like I think, like I said, I think Christians for various reasons tend to struggle even more than like this wider society. Like I think that's why you see a lot of like Christian books. Like the heroes are almost always just they believe what we do. They're Christian. Like you
Yeah.
rarely ever have a faith-based movie or something that's not starring like the hero as like a Christian that lives
Yeah.
very morally, and like we don't explore more of those things. And Stephen does say it's interesting if we go down sort of that path. We would have to kind of reject authors like Solomon, who have multiple wives, David, adulteress, murderer, Paul, persecutor. Again, obviously some of those characters change or all of them change their hearts. But it's sort of this empty path. And it does seem like society, despite the fact that this is going viral, is kind of waking up to the fact that like you can't just sort of live that way and approach art wholly through like sort of this judgment of the creator. Hey, let us know if you guys are watching this back later. If you guys have any more thoughts throughout the show, because as Christians, it is something that we need to learn how to navigate, how to deal with art created by people that we don't agree with, or people that are good people that create art and characters that reflect worldviews and lifestyles and deeds that don't line up with how we would live our own life. Those questions are inevitable. But one of the questions I know I have, and probably some of you guys have, I know our crew has, and we've been wondering all week, is what in the world is Sam going to share with us in his Host Corner? So the next segment of our show, we have Host Corner.
Having a few technical difficulties today, but that's okay. The Host Corner must go on. And no, I'm not going to talk about the latest pictures from the James Webb Space Telescope, which are awesome. They're of Jupiter. You should check it out. But I will be talking about, I've almost finished the third book in the trilogy of Lord of the Rings. I'm doing it the audio version, and I have to say, like, these are just some fantastic books. You already know this, Daniel, but it's so refreshing to kind of go back and to reread these, or maybe even read them for the first time. I don't know. It's been a while. But it's just such amazing storytelling, and you can see how, like, there's so many, like, epic, like, he really did create this genre of sort of fantasy with Middle Earth and everything. And sort of as I prep for, the Rings of Power coming up here, I thought I would go back and listen to these, and they're great. And I think if you haven't read the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you should definitely go pick up a copy. I think this copy we have on the screen is like maybe the original covers from 1950, mid 50s. But anyways, and I know that it doesn't have the now major motion picture cover that you so love and cherish, but go read Lord of the Rings.
Hey, well, you know what? I will admit, I think you sold me. I might check these books out. I might.
You should.
I've heard good things. They are books I think that I think is an essential reading for Christians. I do think at some point, I think often I read these. I start January 1st every year. I start with the first one. I read through the trilogy, then I go back and read The Hobbit. Afterwards, even though that's kind of the reverse order, but I do think there's so much depth to the stories.
Yeah.
That, like, the more you read them, almost the more you you notice, and you can kind of get deeper into it and just realize like there's so much going on in these stories.
Well, and I think to piggyback on what we talk about with like characters and flaws, and even just we've talked about some before, like the idea of anti-heroes and that kind of stuff, is the thing that's I think so great about these is the heroes of the story are obviously flawed individuals, and it's just interesting how like everyone's flaws sort of interconnect in a way that other people can make up the difference. And like the Fellowship with the Ring, like you've got different characters who sort of fill in the gaps of the shortcomings of others, and like all together they're sort of making headway in their quest. And so I think it's just neat to see that it's not just this super simplistic, like this is the hero, these are the baddies. I mean, although it's very clear like who's on the good side and who's on the bad side, but like just the characters themselves have problems and like things to overcome.
Yeah, and it was especially I think if you like read the books as opposed to like the movie stuff, is like it is a very like mischaracterization. This very simplistic good versus evil. Like there's so much like this sort of like tragedy and like dark stuff going on in these stories. Like that's sort of like the backdrop for some of this. Like, hey, if you've never done so, check it out. Hey, with the Rings of Power coming out next week, it's a good time to get a good edifying dose of Lord of the Rings. But kind of our main conversation that I wanted us to get into today, this is based, it's kind of a general topic that we've somewhat touched on before, but not necessarily like from this perspective. And it's based kind of on an article that was sent to me from CBN News, kind of looking at what they sort of see like the like R-rated movies, sort of the decline, I guess, of R-rated movies. And again, this is an article from a Christian perspective, and that's kind of making the case that, hey, the audiences don't want R-rated movies, that we need kind of more clean movies, that's sort of the way to go. So I thought I'll get into some of the quotes and stuff from this article, and then I think we just have like a wider discussion.
Yeah.
I do think it is, as Christians, like how do we sort of approach movie ratings, and like, are they helpful? Are they not helpful? And even beyond that, like just how do we approach content and think about movies kind of in that framework? So here's a couple kind of quotes from this article, then we can kind of start breaking this down. It says, moviegoers are making their voices heard in a powerful way, declaring with their wallets that they'd much rather watch clean movies. According to The Numbers, which is a helpful website that I use, the majority of movies that were shown in theaters over the past 2 years were PG-13. And what's even more notable is that every movie that grossed over $100 million in 2021 was PG-13. So cleaner movies results in more profits. So why doesn't Hollywood respond? Give the audience what they want, right? And then they quote a different article from like an op-ed in Desert News, where it says, we're not inclined to believe in conspiracy theories, but the least we can say here is that Hollywood is out of touch with its audience. Perhaps this has to do with the personal tastes of industry officers and producers, many of who live lives far different from the average American. By simply removing unnecessary swear words, which could hardly be considered art, they could lower a film's rating and earn 25 to 35% more in profits. That could translate into tens of millions of dollars. It could also translate into cleaner entertainment, which would mean a cleaner retelling of things one has seen on the screen and a gradual elevation of culture in general. That's what the market wants, if anyone is listening. So there's several things in there to kind of unpack, and there's kind of more that goes on in that article that we probably won't get into, but just sort of the general argument being that like kind of PG-13 you would think is cleaner content-wise than R. They make more money, therefore like the culture, society wants cleaner movies, and like if we just sort of make R-rated movies cleaner, then they'll make more money, and that this is sort of like we're voting with our wallets. I think there's several issues with this, but what's your takeaway from some of this?
Yeah, I can't believe that there are executives in Hollywood who all they have to do is drop a couple of F-bombs and they're just going to make millions of dollars more. Like, I can't believe it's that simple, and yet they keep those movies R-rated just so they can make less money. Those ungreedy executives. Yeah, I think there are a few problems, I think, with this argument. One is the fact that the vast majority of movies that are produced are PG-13 or PG. Like, if you look at that graph we had from The Numbers, it's like, in fact, they are giving us what we want. It's like, so what's, like, you want more of what you want? Like, I don't know. Like, the idea that evil Hollywood is just cranking out all these R-rated movies that no one wants. It's kind of ridiculous because, one, it's a very small percentage of the actual of all the total movies that they produce, and So I think it's just sort of an odd argument that it's like, hey, like, why don't you just give us more PG-13 movies? It's like, yeah, they are. Like 70% of the movies are PG-13. So it just seems kind of weird that they would sort of
Yeah,
make that.
it's kind of again. Maybe we should from the onset with the caveat that like obviously Christians need to be discerning and like we're called to holiness and like it's
Yeah.
not like no Christian. We want our trashy, pornographic, profane films. Give us more of that. Like obviously, like that
Yeah.
sort of goes without saying. So kind of setting that aside, that we realize
Yeah.
that it does seem like this is sort of a perspective on like the movie industry and just like art in general. That's sort of like, again, the article didn't even list authors. I don't know who wrote this, but like from the outside looking in without not someone that maybe is like engaged as much like in sort of how this works. But like, I think some of it, kind of my takeaway from it at least, is like sort of the thrust of the argument is that like sort of there's one type of like film. And we sort of need like, this seems to be the one that applies to the most people. Therefore, like everything should be like almost like sort of the family film is like the baseline and like don't divert. And there's an interesting
which I would say they're not even. I don't even think that they're making the argument that like that is the baseline. I think they're making the argument that like that should be what everything is. Like not even like most of it should be there. It's like no, everything needs to fall into these like
it's sort of like
family-friendly parameters.
Like every film should be appropriate for families to go to. And again, I think there are definitely issues with that kind of setting it as the number. There's an interesting book that I grabbed for myself called Painting by Numbers, and basically
something you love to do, you winding down in the evening.
Not the fun thing that I do in my evening with all my little colors and paints. But these guys did like this extensive, like this millions of people surveyed for like what their artistic preferences are, and basically tried to like create the perfect painting that would like appeal to everyone. Like whatever's the most popular. Like they like this color of landscape. They like this many animals. They like this sort of They put all that into like a blender and they kind of churned out these paintings that were supposed to be like these will be the most popular paintings, and like they're not good art. Like they're not. As you could, as you would expect, like they don't. And like, kind of what I took from that book is like, there are lots of different sort of preferences and things that people like or values, but like, when you try and put all those together, like, it doesn't necessarily equal like, therefore this will be for everyone. And like,
so, go ahead.
So like, as far as like for movies, like I think, the fact that like a PG-13 movie makes more money is obvious. Like movies that are have the least restrictions that kind of appeal to like the biggest mass of people are probably going to make more money. But that doesn't necessarily follow then that like there isn't value in like, because like R-rated movies make more than G-rated movies. Like do we need to like have audiences said no G-rated movies? Like
the audiences are clear in their preferences to like we need to just stop making G-rated movies altogether. Like
like, there's obviously a value, but like most of those I think end up like on TV because parents aren't bringing those really young kids to the theaters. So they're not going to make money, and like so like I think like the fact that like an R-rated movie doesn't always make as much as like a big blockbuster middle of the summer like doesn't necessarily mean like there's not value in like having more mature content that's not for because sort of the takeaway from this is like the most challenging like the top level of like a film should be something that you can bring your like 10-year-old kid to, and like anything that's sort of beyond what's appropriate for them is inappropriate for anyone. And like I don't know, I just think it's so unchallenging for us.
Well, I was going to interrupt you earlier. It just made me think of just this idea of like you pull together all of the things that everybody loves. It sort of reminds me of like when my 3-year-old wants to paint with all of her favorite colors. Like it ends up being like just a brown blob. Like when you like mix in all the I love pink and green and blue, and so you mix in all these colors and it's like it's kind of a gross color at the end of it. And so like I think that's the thing with trying to like make something that has like mass appeal. strictly on the basis of trying to make it have mass appeal, like I don't know that that's ever going to work out well for whatever art is being created. Like I think it needs to be done more so on like the artistic level of like, this is a really good story and it's compelling and I think we can tell it in this way. And then, you know, let that speak for itself rather than like, so what's like the best like concoction of like action, of comedy, of drama, of rating, and like let's put that together so it can have like mass appeal. Like that won't ever work out.
Yeah, and even just like the idea, like in the article where it talks about like, you know, if you just cut enough stuff out to like lower it, like that's gonna lead to more profit. Like I think in some cases, like I think, you know, like usually I think if you have 2 F bombs, you're R. If you have 1, then you can be PG-13.
Yeah.
So like every PG-13 movie has 1, like unnecessary just because they can. You know, could you cut 2 and move it down if that's all there is? Like, yeah, like you could do that. You probably should do that in most cases. But it's the idea that like, you know, that it, because like for some movies, like the one that came to mind, just because it's fairly recent, and there's the second one in the news right now is like Joker. Like, is that the same film as a like a
PG-13
as like a PG-13
version.
or a PG or like some of those, or like a Saving Private Ryan? Like, is that the same kind of film? You know, it's like the PG. You can bring your kids to it to go see, you know, the D-Day. You know, like
The Beaches of Normandy, but for children.
for kids. You know, they give you like coloring pages when you enter the theater. Like it's a totally different film. Like it impacts you differently. Like I think, like again, like we said, like, there are stuff like kind of R-rated content that Christians need to be very cautious with, should avoid, should have higher standards than anyone. Like all that aside, but like the fact that like some films like are more aimed to like disturb you and like unsettle you and like deal with just sort of like grittiness and like depravity and some of that stuff, like I think they almost necessitate like being a more mature. That's not just for like there are things that like I want films to like kind of help like, emotions and stuff that like that I don't think like my 7-year-old boys are ready for.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean like I'm not ready to kind of deal with some of that and wrestle and, you know, this sort of be offset and cause me to think. And but it's I think in some ways it comes back to this like just sort of this equation that we sometimes have as like the church or as Christians, that like it's all about the content, and like the lower the content, the better the film. And I guess, you know, the goal is always this clean, and like it ends up being a very like, you sort of set the boundaries at like things that won't challenge you at all as a viewer. Like, you know, that's very just for the kids, for everyone. And I think we miss out on like the potential, I guess, of like films to do more than just like entertain the kids.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of the idea too, like if you can, like from another angle, it's sort of this idea of like safe spaces. Like, you know, you can come into the space and like nothing is going to challenge you. And I think oftentimes we're doing the same thing in churches by saying like, well, you know, we just want this to be a safe space. And obviously there are times, like especially for kids, like you know, you need to guard your kids, you know, when it comes to the content that they consume. But also I think as kids become teenagers and adults, it's like when you're never like in a healthy way, you know, bringing stuff to them that's going to be challenging to them, that's going to make them think, then you just have these sort of mush people that grow up and just kind of get tossed by the wind of pop culture or, you know, whatever's happening in the world, because they've never wrestled with some of this stuff in an environment that allowed them to wrestle with it, but still like land on their feet. And so I think that's part of this issue, is because we just want all of our content to be, you know, this sort of like vanilla, you know, down the middle, not challenging, not, you know, making you uncomfortable, but just sort of the safe consumer grade.
And I think in some ways this is selfish. Like we want everything to be for us, and like because even like this article almost implies like we're forced to like take kids to like, you know, like most of the movies made are PG-13, but there are some R-rated movies. And
I'd be out there at all these movies were it not for the ratings. It's
but it's
bringing
like, hey,
my 3-year-old.
You know, like there are films that I won't go to that are rated R. There are films like I just went to Beast, the last movie we reviewed, that was rated R. You know, so there's more discernment required. But hey, let us know what you guys think. You know, are ratings helpful? Is it sort of like a trap to fall into of like anything above PG-13 is somehow like inherently sinful, and like if we just get everything clean and for families, that's sort of the sweet spot? Or is there room in art just to like, hey, explore different things, try things, some mature stuff, some stuff for kids, and just sort of navigate what comes? Love to have that conversation with you guys. But kind of final thoughts here for our episode. A couple things to let you guys know as far as like the collision, kind of everything going on with there. Could you check out? Like I said, I just reviewed Beast. Again, this is the sort of movie that I like. I don't know if it's the kind of movie that a lot of people like. Is sort of that survival thriller thing. Reviewed that. So hey, if you want to see a movie that's like nothing else coming up for months, check that out. Also, shout out another recent review, 13 Lives. Good movie on Amazon Prime. It just seemed like it didn't get enough buzz, but I really liked it. Probably one of my favorite films of the year. Also, encourage you to check out, we have an article on our website, thecollision.org, kind of talking about what we talked about here, like the Hamilton, kind of the baptized version of it, controversy, kind of get into some takeaways. One more review too, Top Gun. Today is the digital release. I don't think you can rent it. I think you can only like buy it digitally or like pay some obscene amount to rent it maybe for like a day, like some of that, like whatever they call that, like Prime rental or whatever it is. But hey, one of the most like successful movies of the year, probably the best movie of the year. Did you ever see?
No, I didn't.
Still not seen
no,
Top
I
Gun?
still haven't seen it. I know.
Well, I'm sure it will look good on your small iPhone screen like it did.
Can't wait to watch it
when
on
I
my
saw it
phone.
in the big Dolby theater. But anything else going on this week for?
Not too much. I'll leave you with a quote here from G.K. Chesterton. The traveler sees what he sees. The tourist sees what he has come to see.
Hey, we'll let you chew on that one for the next couple of days and try and figure out what in the world that means. But I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank the crew, although they were silent. People of mystery. Maybe next week we'll get their lovely faces back onto screen and they can share their review of what they thought of their Poppable, if it lived up to the hype. But thanks for joining us, guys. If you haven't done so, subscribe to our channel, like the video, do all that stuff. But stay safe, guys, and continue to collide with your world for Christ.